treat people like people. And we forget about that a lot. There's sometimes this like, yeah, these are just the offshore resources or the nearshore resources. And then there's this kind of like us versus them. These are real people, treat that like that.
My special guest today is Brian Samson, and Brian is with Plugg Technologies. He's based in Hawaii, and as we're recording this in the winter, it sounds really nice, Brian, to be in Hawaii in the winter time, and you don't get the cold and the snow. You do get other things, and we are so glad you're here on the Getting the Deal Done podcast. So welcome.
Thanks for having me. And I did grow up in the Midwest. I did grow up scraping my windshield in the -5 degree weather. So
Yeah.
kind of feel like I've earned it a little bit.
So tell us about a little bit about Plugg Technologies and how, what's your journey that got you there? Because I know you've started other companies.
Yeah, sure. So grew up in the Midwest, and then ended up in California as a recruiter, um, working a lot with the VC funded tech startups, and they're everywhere in San Francisco.
Yeah.
So I did one stint with Google, realized it was just too big, man, and they're way bigger now than they were when I was there. Although I did enjoy, riding the Google bikes around campus and all the all you can eat buffets, and I certainly had more than my fill with that. But San Francisco is where I lived, and there's just tech startups everywhere. So I worked for a whole bunch of them. And just like anybody's usual experience, you've got a couple winners and a couple losers. But I ended up as the what they call head of talent, which is kind of a tech startup thing title, but it really just means I was in charge of recruiting for the company. Um, the unique thing about Silicon Valley is you're kind of poor until you raise money, and then you raise money and you're rich, and your investors are really demanding that you deploy that capital. And where does that capital tend to go? About 70% of it is labor, and a huge percentage of that 70% goes to technology team members. So I was really the facilitator of capital, in that role, going out and sourcing candidates, negotiating offers, trying to find, the best software developers for these companies. The ones that did really well was that company called Lending Club in the pre-IPO days. Um, there was a small window in there where the company was valued at $10 billion at the IPO, second biggest IPO of 2014 after Alibaba. But since then, it's sub a billion public company. Was able to cash in a little bit of stock options, but nothing crazy, paid for grad school. And then a couple other ones. One was called Soch, Series B company, and then that ended up almost running out of money, kind of a Hail Mary acquisition with a delivery company called Postmates. And then Postmates was acquired by Uber, a company called Optimize, another company called Apartment List. But really what they had in common is they really had no recruiting, and then they raise capital. They hire a guy like me, and I go out and, try to build the company, create value, and find those really hard to find make or break, software developers. Um, I didn't know any entrepreneurs when I was growing up. My dad worked for the same company, for 30 years, a manufacturing company. So this is like a whole world for me. I went to a school nobody had heard of in the Midwest, and I'm surrounded by all these Stanford guys and Berkeley and MIT, Caltech, and um, really kind of had this imposter syndrome for a long time when I was there. But after about 5 years, I had enough success and thought, I think I might be ready for this founder journey. I but I had a totally different idea of what I wanted to do, the ideal versus the reality. So the ideal was I really wanted to be either a founder in Asia or an expat in Asia. And I was just like enamored with the Singapore skyline, and I had been there a few times, and or Shanghai, and just that exciting life. Um, and I reached out to somebody that I knew, um, and at the same time I was doing a grad school program and with UCLA, so I got my MBA from UCLA, but also my MBA from National University of Singapore. And I had reached out to somebody in China to maybe, help them grow their tech startup out there. Um, that wasn't biting. The fish weren't biting on that one, but I think he liked my initiative. So he said, "Hey, if you have any other ideas, just look me up." So where I saw was this pattern. Gosh, this is 10 years ago now, 11 years ago. But I saw this pattern in San Francisco where fintechs were popping up everywhere, right? And I had done some time with Lending Club, which was kind of the one of the original fintechs. I mean, really PayPal is like the original, but Lending Club was kind of the next generation, and learned all about this world. Saw a pattern that fintech founders were really business people that had access to capital, product visions, totally agnostic about how their technology stack looked or the prototype or the minimum viable product, the MVP, could care less. They just wanted something. So that was this light bulb of what if I could have a company that built these minimum viable products, um, put a whole pitch together, went back to that person in China, and I got $2 million in funding to do it. Um, and I $2 million seems like $1 billion from where I came from, but I realized that that would get me would not get me very far in San Francisco, which is a very expensive place to live and do business. So I started looking around. Where would I put my engineering team? And I knew sales would be in San Francisco. Where would I put my engineering team? And a few years prior, I had done this backpacking trip to Argentina, just like staying in hostels, bunk beds, that type of thing. But really, really, really enjoyed it, and decided to relocate to Buenos Aires. I was married. I'm still married, but we didn't have any kids yet. So my wife and I moved to Argentina, and this is really my first official kind of founder mode. And I realized I did it on hard mode because, it's although they speak English there, Spanish is the primary language. Um, I was contrasting with Singapore, which is usually either the first or second easiest country in the world to do business. Argentina is like 190th, you know. Um, uh, Everything is vague, everything is gray. You have no clarity on what stuff needs to be processed, what needs a little nudge with bureaucrats, getting payroll set up, everything. But I ended up figuring it out, and that led me to building an 80-person company out there. And then just love the world of nearshore, and I've since started two other companies. And I realize I've been talking for a whole lot here, John, so I'll take a pause, but I can go deeper in any area you want me to.
Yeah, well, it's a good lead into what does uh, Plugg Technologies do?
Yeah,
Who do you help?
yeah.
And what are some of the results? So let's start with what does Plugg Technologies do for your customers or clients?
Yeah, so we're really a nearshore talent broker, I think is probably the best way to look at it. And what does it mean to be nearshore? You've got a smart audience, I know, and I'm sure they understand the world of offshore, but not everyone knows this term nearshore. Nearshore is a relative term. So if your company is in Australia, you might nearshore to the Philippines, but if you're in the States, you're going to offshore to the
Yeah.
Philippines. So it's really about time zone. So for the States, nearshoring is Latin America, same time zone. And that never really seemed to matter so much until COVID. And remote work seemed possible and a lot easier to do. But at the same time, it got so extreme, and you had people living everywhere in the world, and then companies realized, okay, we got to rein this back in. Time zone matters. And it also gave this contrast between, say, India and the Philippines versus Latin America. Asia's always going to win on price, but not dramatically anymore. Latin America is just a little bit more expensive, but I think that time zone and all the other cultural similarities, the English, the ability to do critical thinking, solve problems, all that stuff I can get into. Um, but anyway, we've got, Plugg's been around for 4 years. We do about 100 placements a year for small to medium-sized companies. So everywhere from, one or two placements to big teams. We've got clients with 30, 40 team members. And sure, there's an element of like DIY. You could always do it yourself and try to hire. There are platforms like Fiverr and Upwork. The thing that nobody really tells you, though, is that once you've kind of reached a certain scale, you need a lot of people. And you realize that the best talent isn't on those platforms because those platforms are built for the employer, not the candidate. So the fees are very cost prohibitive for talent. So we've got, 10 years of credibility, validation in the region. Latin America is generally mistrusting of new entrants. You really have to kind of earn your right to be trusted there. And you can't blame them. Look at the way government, functions in Latin America. It's volatile. You read stories about, corruption. You read about Venezuela, and Maduro's been in the news. You see Argentina and inflation and chaos. Um, so people don't trust governments, they don't trust new entrants, they don't trust companies. So we've spent 10 years of doing what we say we're going to do. We do 100 placements a year. People trust us. So this gives us access to this incredible database of people that we can make introductions to. And as companies are looking for talent in Latin America, they're looking for two things. They're looking for arbitrage. So they want to get a senior person in Latin America for what they pay a junior person in the States. Okay, so they get that
Hmm.
arbitrage there. And they also want the days have kind of shifted. A decade or two ago, you would look at India or Latin America as the place where you would always have like the new product development, the hot new exciting technical work in the States, and then all the legacy maintenance QA stuff you just throw over offshore and nearshore. That's really shifted. You're seeing a lot more VC dollars and private equity money going to Latin America. You're seeing a lot of new unicorns, really successful companies. And that's what you need whenever you're trying to drive new innovation and a hot startup market. It's not just capital, it's company success. And then all that knowledge is recycled. Everybody starts to create new companies and more new companies, and they get experience doing the hard stuff, the hard, challenging work. So Latin America is now a place that companies look to to find talent that can handle hard problems, complex problems, um, really complicated architecture, building brand new products, working with AI, R&D, Brazil, Argentina, Mexico, Colombia. These are really amazing talent markets. So to sum it all up, John, we are the trusted connector of all this hot talent in Latin America to companies that are looking for arbitrage. And I think Latin America is the most exciting labor arbitrage opportunity in the market today.
And are most of your clients tech companies or all of them?
Uh, it ranges, but I'd say most of the roles we fill are IT related.
Okay. What is the size company type? I mean, you said not a tech, you mentioned AI. So what is the typical size of a company? How many employees
Yeah.
do they have total?
Yeah, I think there might be like two different types of customers we'll service. The first is that small company, it could be a VC funded tech company or it could even be an agency. But they're looking for their first couple. Usually what happens, I think, in almost any company is you hire everybody that you know, and then you run out of people. And then you're ready to make that next growth. This is something I learned, in my head of talent days. Um, but you're also working with constricted budgets. OpenAI can raise, you know, gosh, like $100 billion or more today. But there's a lot of tech companies that are no longer raising their Series A or Series B, or instead of every 18 months, it's 3 years and you got to stretch that cash. So they're looking for arbitrage. They're looking for ways to stretch their dollars. So usually they'll hire a few people in the States and then everyone else that they bring on will be, say, in Latin America, nearshored. And they just get more bang for the buck and they still get the talent they're looking for. So that's in that small, VC funded seed or Series A or maybe a agency. And then there's a whole other grouping, could be private equity backed mid-market company, like say a healthcare, health tech company, could be a later stage fintech company, and they're looking for scale. So they're looking for smart people. They're not just looking for, bodies. I think the days are over for that. They're looking for people that will fit in on their team and understand the complicated, very specific technical architecture, meet their hiring bar, meet their culture, and they're looking to fill teams, 5, 10, 15, 20, pods, things like that. And we do that quite a bit as well.
Okay. Do you ever get involved with financial companies? And I'll ask because I know of a CPA firm that, we know pretty well that keeps an office not near shore, but in the Philippines.
Yeah.
And they have a pretty good sized staff. And most of these people over there have a United States CPA designation.
Yeah, yeah, interesting. Every once in a while we'll get a financial role. I wouldn't say that we have focused on that financial services market, but we have filled financial positions, like billings coordinators, accountants, roles like that. Usually as um, I think IT is probably 90% of the roles we fill, but it's not 100. So there's this 10% of marketing, content, accounting, finance, back office, things like that.
What would what would be your top, say, three tips for companies thinking of doing some nearshoring, and what would lead them to want to do it? What would the situations be? We're
Yeah.
faced with X, so we're going to nearshore some people.
Yeah, sure. So I think the first thing is don't fundamentally alter your hiring process. So the way you hire, let's say you're in Dallas and you hire in, if you're going to hire somebody in Houston, use that exact same process if you're going to hire somebody in Colombia, right? Maybe you do a test based on the job function. Maybe you do a values and culture-based interview and a domain expertise interview. Do the same thing. Okay. I think the second thing I would say is treat people like people. And we forget about that a lot. There's sometimes this like, yeah, these are just the offshore resources or the nearshore resources. And then there's this kind of like us versus them. These are real people, treat that like that. And the third is more introspective. And this might help you decide if you should do Asia or you should do Latin America. I've got a lot of great things to say about Asia, but I will say, and this is from my own experience I was in a unique position with this degree from NUS in Singapore and UCLA.
Mm-hmm.
So I would take, we would kind of go back and forth between professors from California and professors in Asia. The ones that were from UCLA thrived on classroom debate. They loved to be challenged. So you could say something and just, professor, I disagree. And here's why. And then somebody else would say, no, I agree, or I do. And they love that challenge. And I think that's kind of unique with American institutions. They like to have this classroom debate, especially in the MBA classrooms. But try that in Asia. It doesn't really happen. It's a much more hierarchical, respectful, senior, based on seniority. And I don't think the professors enjoy being pushed back, or challenged. And I think that is cultural. So you have a lot of layers. Bad feedback rarely goes up the chain. Um, it's more of a, acknowledge. And what that also means is people kind of stay in the box. So if you've ever called United Airlines and been connected to the call center in the Philippines, and you have something simple, I'm traveling from New York to Cincinnati on February 15th, but I need to change that to February 18th. No problem. And they take care of it. But what if you instead want to go from New York and instead of Cincinnati, you want to go to Chicago and then Cincinnati, and you want to use your mileage account number and uh and you already paid for a check bag, but you don't need it anymore. You might as well have asked them to build a spaceship. It's just, like too much. It's too much for them to figure out. Um, and that kind of goes with this like very process driven. If you're a company that has very mature processes and everything is documented, there's 18 steps to do something, I think Asia is probably right for you. Okay. But if you're like most small companies, you've got new problems that pop up every day. There's a lot of ambiguity. Um, this is why I love Latin America, because think about what I just said earlier: volatility, poor government, inflation, a lot of chaos. And this population is just used to it. They're used to navigating chaos and being calm under chaos. They're used to volatility. They're flexible, adaptable, able to overcome adversity, think of creative ways to solve problems. This is just their regular life. So they're really good at all these things. So in all my businesses, my internal staff is nearshore too, because hey, I don't know the 18-step process. There's new problems every day. So, but the beautiful thing is I can throw a problem over the wall. And by the time I wake up, they've thought about it, digested it, and solved it. And that's really what I want. And some businesses need problem solvers. Others have systems that they can plug labor into. If you're a system company, think Asia. If you're a little more like me and you kind of fly by the seat of your pants, entrepreneur, I think Latin America is going to be a better alignment for you.
Yeah, well, you just covered a risk and a solution for the risk and
Yeah,
the type of people that it is. And yes, I have been on many calls with people, and I don't know where they all are. They could be down the street from me or across the world where it is very scripted
yeah,
and no uh, you know, ingenuity from the person on the phone. It's yes, I am glad to be talking to you, Brian, and I will help to solve your problem. And
yeah, that's right.
yeah, so it's yeah, interesting. Yeah, you're seeing more and more of this, and this is something I think a lot more companies should be considering. Um, Time's gone by pretty fast here. I'd like to finish by a couple things. One, you're in Hawaii, so what do you like to do when you're not building talent teams?
Yeah, I'm in this magical point of life where my kids are 5 and 6 years old. So they're at that point where I'm lucky that they love spending time with me. We can be in the water 350 days a year, so we spend a lot of time at the beach, a lot of time swimming in pools. And anything with my kids that's water related is a great day for me.
Okay. So, is there anything, we didn't discuss, I didn't ask that you feel is important you'd like to finish up and get out?
I think we covered a lot of the nearshore. Maybe one other thing I'd mention is there's a lot of people that I would maybe classify as nearshore curious today, where Latin America is more in the news, sometimes for better, sometimes for worse, but it's just more in the news. I think we're seeing this a lot. And people are hearing about talent in Latin America, they're hearing about nearshore. I have multiple conversations every single day with people that are just kind of curious, about how this all works. Um, there's no commitment. Um, and I just like sharing my personal experience of being an expat in Argentina. My business partner was an expat in Monterrey, Mexico. And we can share our first person accounts and also give advice on this is your budget, this is the type of talent you're looking for, this is the hardware that you need the talent to use. And there's all sorts of interesting nuances there. And we can just kind of spitball, brainstorm, give you advice on, if you just need one person, this is the city or country I'd look at. If you might one day need to grow that to 10 or 20, maybe I'd look at this one and just talk about the trade-offs because Latin America nearshoring, there's a lot of trade-offs. There's a lot of different countries there, and they're not all the same. It's not all one size fits all. So we just have a lot of really fun advisory calls with people that are curious about it.
So, how do people get hold of you and Plugg Technologies?
Plugg.tech, Tech. That's our website. And if anybody wants to reach out to me directly, it's simply Brian, Brian, at plugg.tech.
Okay, Plugg.tech. That's easy. So, Brian, thank you for being on. Again, this is the Getting the Deal Done podcast, and it seems like Brian is quite the expert at getting the talent deal done for people with the right person for the right cost in the right place. So, thank you, Brian.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Okay, glad to have you.